Welcome to the Birth Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Hoff, BSN RN. I am a wife, a mother of two, and a nurse specializing in the care of women and newborns. In this podcast, we will share powerful journeys of birth givers with the goals of lifting the veil on the birth experience, healing through sharing, and beginning an open conversation to strengthen trust and promote transparency between birthing people and healthcare providers. Hello. Today I have with me Sacha Hahn. Sacha is the mother of two. She's a former labor and delivery nurse. Now she is working in public health policy. Sacha had two inductions, one with and one without an epidural. And she is here to share her birth stories with us, as well as her insight as a former labor and delivery nurse. Sacha, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me, Kelly. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so excited to hear your stories. I have heard legend of your second delivery. It's told on our floor so many times.
I'm sure. Well, I was trying to remember if you were there that night when I did deliver, we're coming on shift.
I may have been, but I think that I was so new, and I just know that part of my career, I was deer in the headlights because when I was on nights, it was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And I think it was a very short period, but wow.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure it was a legendary delivery because it was an interesting night from what I heard afterwards, right?
Yeah. That's probably another reason that I was not aware of what was going on. I probably heard it and didn't make the connection. I probably had my own problems. All right. Well, I haven't heard about your first delivery, so let's go ahead and start with that one.
Sure. So first delivery, had been working full time, didn't think anything was wrong. And like every mother that goes past their due date, at least here, after your 40 weeks and 3 days, you would go to the high-risk center, have a non-stress test where they listen to the heartbeat for about 20 minutes, see what that tells us, get an ultrasound, make sure that there's enough fluid around the baby and everything looks good to let you stay pregnant longer to either go into labor on your own or at some point probably be induced at 41 weeks, which is like kind of par for the course at our hospital. And so I go and, I see my favorite maternal fetal medicine specialist, and he comes in and he's just like, I think we're done today. And I was like, okay, well, I didn't really want to be induced, but okay, that's fine. Just as long as you let me eat, I'll do whatever you want. And he's like, yeah, you'll be fine. And I talked to another colleague, Betsy, and she showed me the fetal heart rate monitor. I'm like, oh, that doesn't look so great. Okay, I get it. And go upstairs. I'm put all the way at the end of the long hallway. And back then, we hadn't had any pregnant nurses in a while. So management was still kind of flexible with the traditional, who's on staff today? Who do you want to be your nurse? And I was like, oh, I want my friend Michelle. I know she will take excellent care of me. And the poor woman, she had been in the OR all day. It's like 3:00 in the afternoon. In the OR all day, had a high-risk person next to me with like 4 different medications on drips and stuff. But I'm sitting there, I finished my lunch, and I sent my husband home to get like the one bag with the 4 things that I needed. And, he's gone forever. And I'm just sitting there waiting for my doctor to come in after her office hours to check my cervix and decide what we're going to do for plan of care to induce me. I'm just sitting there, and the next thing I do is I look over and I hear it, and the heart rate just tanks. Just, normally it's like dun 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 dun, and hers is like gunk gunk gunk, and I'm I'm in Siberia on the unit, so I start doing all the things we do for our patients, and I have no IV in yet. So I'm like hooking up the oxygen, putting it on myself, turning myself, thinking like, well, maybe it's a cord if I turn here. So I'm managing it, and then Lynn, our charge nurse that day, comes in, and no drugs, no contractions, no drugs. And I have like a 5-minute decel down into like the 60s, which is horrible for a baby. And I was like, oh, this is going to be an interesting induction, right? Like I took a hypnobirthing class because I saw value in it with my patients. One of the midwives that practiced on our unit taught the class, and all of her patients were able to go natural, and just they're some of my favorite birth stories with those patients. And so I was like, well, I don't need a childbirth class for myself, but my husband does. So a hypnobirthing is kind of 2-for-1 special because it'll help teach me some tools for myself and then teach my husband about it, right? So I plan to go natural and everything, and I see that big dip, and I was like, okay, time to start strategizing, labor and delivery nurses, we either have very easy, straightforward deliveries or we're a hot mess. It's one or the other. And I was like, okay, so I bought the ticket for a hot mess. And so baby comes back up, is fine after, doctor comes, and it's like, well, you're like 2 centimeters, so I'm going to go ahead and break your water, and we'll just start Pitocin. And I'm like, the two things I didn't want, but I knew where I might be heading. And so I was like, well, okay, I know I can't use any of the other medications because Pitocin is the most tightly controlled drug, right? And our body metabolizes it the fastest, so it can get out of my system if needed, if I have another big dip in the heart rate. And so broke the water, and just the most disgusting, thick meconium-stained amniotic fluid you've ever seen, like the ugliest pea soup you've ever seen. And I was like, okay, another check mark. I'm headed to the OR at some point tonight. Like, this is not boding well for my plans. And at that point, I think I just kind of gave in. Like, this is not going to go the way I want. And that's okay, because my baby is showing all these different signs of kind of distress. And I just want a healthy kid. And I know I'm with my coworkers, and we are an amazing team. And I know they won't let anything bad happen to me. But I'm also a control freak. So, I'm trying to hold out on the epidural as long as possible and see if I can get myself into labor. The contractions start coming. And someone once told me it's like getting stabbed in the eye with a pencil. I can't even describe what a Pitocin contraction felt like, but I don't know if it was exacerbated by my anxiety. So I was like trying to control it. I'm so anxious about the well-being of my baby. I knew I was fine. And I was just like, I'm so worried about my baby's well-being and everything. And so that was ramping up, and I just couldn't relax. And, my husband's like, oh, I'm just going to sit over here. I mean, your friends are here, right? And I'm like, no, like, get over here and rub my back. Help me through this. And I'm like, standing on the side of the bed, squatting, doing whatever I can to keep my hips open and relax my pelvis and just let all of that happen. And finally, my friend comes in to check on me. I'm like watching the monitor like a hawk through everything. And she comes in, she's like, Sacha, I'm pulling a double shift to take care of you today. So that tells me you wanted me and you trust me. I'm working a 16-hour shift for you today. So let me be in charge of you. Let me take care of you. And so she turned the monitor off, like the computer screen off. And then she turned the fetal monitoring like computer thing is on a stand. And so she took the stand and turned it all the way around so it faced the wall. So I couldn't see any of it. She was just like, no, I am in charge. You are the patient. You are no longer the nurse. Okay, fine. And then she came in to check on me at one point. Everything's still going okay, but I'm just like, I'm getting in a lot of pain. My anxiety is building and I'm getting really anxious. And she is like, hey, I just wanted to give you a heads up. If you're thinking about an epidural, this is the anesthesiologist that's on call. She'll be leaving in half an hour, but she said she's willing to stay an extra like 45 minutes for you to make a decision. And so I, in my mind, I'm battling. My husband's like completely clueless, right? He's like, you're here with your girlfriends to take care of you. Like, I'm just here to see if it's a boy or girl. And so I was like, well, it was my favorite anesthesiologist. And I was just like, I trust her implicitly. I know she'll take great care of me. She's amazing. I'm going to go ahead and just get the epidural, and I'll either be...
Are you pregnant and planning a hospital birth? You don't need a birth plan. You need a birth vision. In my opinion, birth plans set you up for failure. Yep, I said it. Hear me out before you turn off this podcast. You may think that by downloading a generic birth plan, it means you're in control. The truth is, it's not that simple. No one can control exactly how their birth will go. There are way too many variables. What every pregnant person wants is to walk into the hospital pregnant and to walk out with a healthy newborn in their arms. The journey in between is the murky part. It's hard to know what issues might come up that need to be addressed. If you focus your energy on a birth vision rather than giving your power to a birth plan, you can empower yourself to make the best choices for you and your baby. That's why you need to get into my Empowered Hospital Birth program. As a labor nurse and mindset coach, I can help guide you through the process of maintaining the calm autonomy that will help you achieve the birth vision you desire. In my Empowered Hospital Birth program, I will help you identify the source of anxiety you have surrounding hospital birth, fill in knowledge gaps to make sure that you are fully informed and confident, Learn key phrases so you can better communicate with your medical team. Emotionally process your fears so that they don't hold power over you. Go to kellyhoff.com/empowered to book a free 30-minute private birth vision call, where we will identify your top fears and must-haves and gain clarity on exactly how you want to feel in the birth space. That's kellyhoff.com/empowered. I'm honored to be a part of your birth journey.
Have a C-section after dinner when my OB comes back, or at least I'll, have that epidural if at 3 a.m. the baby just totally tanks and they have to run me to the OR. Me having a natural childbirth versus me going under general anesthesia for an emergency C-section, I was like, I want to be awake for my baby's birth. Now, that was the most important thing to me. So my favorite anesthesiologist hooked me up and I got numb. I hated it. I even hate getting numb at the dentist for like a cavity filling. It drives me crazy. So I didn't like it. I was still able, because she's an amazing anesthesiologist, like it was the perfect dose. Like I could still move myself every, 20, 30 minutes to kind of, as one of our midwives say, you've got to keep the pelvis dynamic. Getting a baby out is like trying to get a really stubborn corkscrew out of a bottle of wine. Like you've got to keep jiggling and moving it. And so I was like, okay, well, at least my epidural, I don't feel the contractions. Like I could feel my belly tightening. Like I felt that movement sensation, but I didn't feel pain associated with it. So I was still able to move and rest and take a little nap and stuff like that. And I never dosed myself because I was like, at some point, if I hit that button, I'm going to be so numb that I'm not going to be able to feel the push, because I've experienced that with patients. And I didn't want them to turn it off, because I knew if they did and it wore off, it was never going to come back on the same. So, I didn't want my mom in the room, but I called her because we lived down the street, and I was like, we're kind of bored. I mean, if you want to come hang out at the hospital for a couple hours before you go to bed, like, I don't care. We're just sitting here. We're not doing anything, right? Thinking, I'm a first-time mom. I got an epidural at 3 centimeters. Like, this is the slowest train to delivery possible. So I was fully prepared, sleep through the night, hope nothing goes wrong. And then if I don't make any progress by morning, I know my OB, she'll probably recommend a C-section. And then that day too, my friend who was the midwife that taught the hypnobirthing class, she was texting me. We did a lot of also like anxiety, psychosocial type stuff. And she was like, hey, I'm off from clinic hours. I don't have to work tomorrow. Would it help you if I came in? And I was like, I would love you to be here. That would be great. And then the doctor comes in to check me after her dinner, and I'm making progress. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, okay, maybe I might not need a C-section. Baby still looks like, I tried not to look at it, but afterwards my friend Michelle was like, that is the worst fetal monitoring strip I've ever seen in my life. And we are all so surprised that the doctor didn't take you for a C-section before you delivered. And I was like, oh, good to know. So I've always been interested to see what it looks like, but I was like, well, maybe not. My kid is healthy and fine now, so we'll leave it alone. So she texts me. I'm like, what, like maybe 5, 6, like, halfway there. But then I start feeling a ton of pressure. And it is the most uncomfortable feeling in the entire world. And I was like, you can't hit the button, because no matter how many times you hit that epidural button, or they come in and they give you like a top off through your epidural of the stronger, like first test dose med, there is nothing in the world that will take that pressure sensation away. And it's uncomfortable. And the way I would use it after I had her, and I'd have patients complaining of pressure or asking me about epidurals when I taught childbirth classes, I said, just imagine that like you've been constipated for like 3 weeks, right? And now you're on this road trip. You're in the middle of freaking nowhere. The next road stop is 20 miles away, and you finally feel the urge to poop, and you have to hold it in. I go, that was what I was experiencing, was like not being allowed to push because I knew I couldn't, right? Because I wasn't fully dilated, and that would just open a whole host of problems. And so thankfully, my midwife friend ended up turning into my doula. Things started happening so fast that like I didn't even have time to kick my mom out. And one of my friends even came in and asked, because they all knew, like I had a birth plan that we would talk about when there weren't patients around. So everybody knew like my mom wasn't supposed to be there. And I was like, screw it. At this point, she might as well just stay. I don't care at this point. I just want to be done, right? And so I did, the sitting on the throne position where it's like you're sitting on a toilet and you lower the lower part of the bed, and I'm, rocking back and forth, and my friend is doing guided imagery with me, and, we have the lights down and everything. And then finally it was time to push. And I don't think I pushed for that long. Part of it is I think I had an amazing core because I was doing Pilates before I got pregnant and throughout my pregnancy. So I was like, thank God I had muscles. But the pressure sensation, like you could feel it getting stronger, just like when you have a bowel movement, like you can feel it getting stronger. And so you push with it and it felt better to do something about it, right? So it was like you finally got to sit on the toilet and get rid of that constipation bowel movement. And so just pushed through it. It was really, I never felt the ring of fire, where as the perineum, the vagina and everything is stretching, I didn't feel that pain. I mean, I felt an immense amount of pressure, but we had, the mirror up so I could see her being born. And it was a really controlled delivery. So I was able to like stop in between each contraction, take slow, deep breaths, let her stretch, do everything that's like the perfect ideal delivery, at least to make your recovery easier. And it's funny, my friend, the midwife friend that was there, she actually captured pictures, and it was like the perfect delivery, watching the head come out and then it makes the turn as the shoulder comes out of the pubic. It was just so amazing. So she's born and we do a quick skin to skin, but because of the meconium, I was like, get her away, like take her to the warmer, suck the poop out of her nose and her mouth. Like she doesn't need to be breathing any of that junk in. And so they took her there. They did everything, which is fine with me. And it was minimal repair because I was able to I didn't really tear that much. I think maybe like 2 quick little stitches for some spots that wouldn't stop bleeding. And then they brought her over and we did skin to skin until it was time to go upstairs. And it was right, like, was she born like 10 minutes before my friend had to clock out on her double shift? Because I remember as I was pushing, she's like, Sasha, you better get it together and get this kid out. Like, I didn't stay double to not meet your child. So it was nice. I just felt relief. Like, okay, I made it. We didn't need a C-section. She's here. Yay, it's a girl. We wanted a girl. We didn't know what we were having. And it was just really cool to have. My mom was there. This, Bianca's 11 years old now. My mom still is like, that is one of the highlights of my elderly life, because she had just turned 70. So they're 70 years apart. And she just was so excited to have had that opportunity. And then, I go up to postpartum at our hospital. There's no cafeteria and there's like horrible vending machines. And at the dinner round, they usually leave some bags with like really pathetic sandwiches with like 2 slices of turkey, a slice of tomato, a slice of lettuce, and like the, you know, mayonnaise packets and stuff. But I had been relatively busy. And so thankfully, my friends were working on postpartum that I loved, and they were like, we've been hoarding food for you all day. When we saw your name on the board, I have like 4 sandwiches for you. And I was like, okay, thanks. I only missed dinner. Like I had lunch. They let me eat lunch. So I'm okay. But they're like, no. One of it is Bo. I don't know if you remember her. She was a midwife in Eastern Europe. And so she took care of me and she's just like, trust me, Sasha, you're going to want this food. And like, I took a nap, or while she was in the nursery, it was still like coming down from the high that like your baby's here, everything's okay. And then all of a sudden, I was more hungry than a teenage boy. I mean, I'm just scarfing sandwiches left, right, and center. It was the weirdest thing ever. And so thirsty too, which I thought was interesting. I was like, I've had 2 liters of basically Gatorade downstairs. Like, why am I thirsty? And then after that, other than breastfeeding adventure, like everything was pretty straightforward. Recovery was easy. I will say though, as a new mom and living in an area where you don't have a lot of support, like I was one of the first of my friends living here to have a baby. My mom had me in the 70s. It was, you were bottle fed, you weren't breastfed. Just the culture of postpartum care was like very American. And my mom stayed with me for a month after I had her, roughly, because she was born right between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And my mom lives on the West Coast. And I was like, why go back and forth? Like, why don't you just come for Thanksgiving and stay through Christmas? So at first I was like, this is great. My mom's here. And it was great in the sense that like she tidied up. She would go walk the dog for me, but she didn't cook for me. She just doesn't cook. But like I would be in the kitchen, starving like a teenage boy and making myself, a smoothie and other stuff. And she would be on the couch cuddling with my daughter and, oh, can you make me some too? And I was kind of like, shouldn't this be the other way around? Like, shouldn't I be the one laying on the couch with my baby and you're the one preparing the food? But I was like, oh, whatever. And then of course it's Christmas and I want to be the like perfect new mom and go to the hospital holiday party and introduce my daughter to everybody and bring something to the table. And she's like 2.5 weeks old and I'm up in the doctor's lounge. Here, I made a homemade cherry cake. That's my thing for the holiday party. And here's my daughter. And I think I didn't allow myself to rest. I was like, oh, I had my newborn. Now I go back to resuming my life and I just add taking her with me everywhere. And then I went home to California for the last 6 weeks of my maternity leave and stayed with my sister just so she could spend time with my daughter. My daughter is actually the only granddaughter on both sides of the family. And so by staying with my sister, she had enough space for me to kind of be with my daughter, and my in-laws could come and go, and all of that was great because they live in the area too. But then like my sister and her twins came down with the flu. So then I was back to like taking care of myself and the newborn again. And it was just less than ideal. It wasn't what I thought. And so I'm pretty sure I had postpartum depression. I mean, I never thought of harming myself or anything, but I just felt like always bummed out. And it was a little more than, let's say, the baby blues. And it really affected me. And I don't know if it's also the challenges I had breastfeeding since I had breast surgery and not being able to give a full supply. And then I didn't find out until she was 6 months old that she had a tongue and lip tie. So that added to it. And it just was a really overwhelming experience. And then having to go back to work, I actually enjoyed that part on the weekends. So I worked out a deal where I was still considered full time, but I only worked weekends and then like 2 mini shifts during the week. So I did enjoy going back because at least now I could like relate to my patients, right? I'm like, I know what you feel. Like that was me 3 months ago. But yeah, I never like got treated for postpartum depression, but I'm pretty sure I had it. And so 2 years later, we decide, let's start trying again. Thank God it took more time to get pregnant than I planned because I think God knew what he was doing, that my kids are perfectly spaced. I don't think I could have handled them any closer together. It all culminated. My husband decides to switch his job. I find out right before Christmas I'm pregnant. And in him switching his job, he was like, why don't you leave working at the hospital and come help me? So I, give my 2 weeks notice, but no one knows I'm pregnant. And I leave my job. Backpedaling to the first pregnancy, I think also a lot of my anxiety was not so great things happen on labor and delivery. It's not always the happiest place in the hospital. And we had what felt like an unusually large number that year. And they would come in these clusters of like 3 to 5 patients, and they were always almost the same gestation as me. And so I was constantly being reminded of the risks. And so it was scaring me. And it's funny. So in the second pregnancy, I'm still in touch with all my labor and delivery friends. I still hang out with them and socialize with them outside of the hospital. And I was talking to my friend Michelle, who delivered my first, and was sharing the anxiety. And I said, it's not as bad this time. And she goes, well, because you're not around it all day, Sacha. You're not around the potential of fill in the blank. Like you're kind of you're a civilian now with a little extra information. That pregnancy, I was considered high risk because I was over 35, which was, a little nerve wracking because again, too much knowledge is sometimes a bad thing. Ultrasounds were fine. Everything was fine. Go in for my weekly non-stress test the last month. Textbook, perfectly happy baby, growing well. And actually, sorry, I'm like, keep going back and forth. I'm on the postpartum floor. It's not normal for maternal fetal medicine specialists to see patients in postpartum, but he comes to see me. And I was kind of like, whoa, because I'm one of his nurses. And he was like, yeah, so I didn't want to share this with you before you went into labor. But so I'm 5'9", my husband 6'2". We're pretty large adults, I guess you could say, even though he's Asian, like he's got the bigger genes of his family. And he said, when you came in and your daughter was measuring 5 pounds, I was kind of like, research shows you guys should be having 8-pound children. And I was like, okay. Thankfully, she wasn't. She was just shy of 7 pounds, but still measured really, really small. So I like to think, looking back on it, she probably was growth restricted. Like my belly never got really big. I didn't have good fetal movement. I don't know if there was like anterior placenta where it's like in the front of the abdomen. So I think there was a whole host of things like, thank God I was in the dark about it, right? And he's like, so, I definitely want to watch you next time just to make sure everything's okay because you should be on track to have like an 8-pound baby. And my thought was, 8 pounds, holy cow, almost 7 pounds was uncomfortable. How am I supposed to do 8 pounds? So everything's fine, prenatal care, everything's textbook perfect, baby's happy as a clam. Too happy 39 weeks comes around and my doctor's like, advanced maternal age. And I was like, okay, well, how about we compromise? And I'm happy to go twice a week, 3 days a week, every day if you want, to the high risk testing center and have the baby checked out. But I'd really want to go into labor on my own. I didn't have much of a obstetrical history to follow. I'm the only biological child of my mother, and her water broke, but she never went into labor. But then she went fast. But there's only a sample size of one, which isn't very good. So I was like, I really want to go into labor on my own. And she's like, well, let's talk at 40 weeks. And I was like, okay. So I go to get my, 40-week ultrasound. I'm seeing the acupuncturist 3 days a week. I'm doing at-home nipple stimulation because I was trying to harvest my own colostrum for the freezer. I was asking my midwife friends to come to my house and try to strip my membranes. Which is like separating the amniotic sac components from the cervix, which can sometimes get people in labor. That was the most painful vaginal exam ever when they would try to do that. So uncomfortable. My friend, who happened to be a doula, was coming over and we were doing the thing where like you're on all fours and they take a blanket and they kind of like shimmy your belly. Because when my OB checked me, she's like, that head is still high. And I was like, I know. And she's like, and you're not even 1 centimeter. I said, right, but this is my second kid. They're pretty close together. And most multips or women that have had babies before, their babies don't drop until they're in active labor, like that sometimes happens. So I'm not too worried about it. She's like, I don't know about this. She is the antithesis of warm and fuzzy, but she does deeply care about her patients. She just doesn't
She's
show
amazing.
it.
Yes.
She's very direct, says it like it is. She thinks all of these things a lot of midwives will do are a bunch of like wackadoodle crazy medicine. And I love that part about labor and delivery and kind of taking care of patients. I was supposed to deliver at another hospital in the city and I loved my OB. He was the biggest dork on the face of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, I know myself. I am a control freak. I will micromanage the nurses at this other hospital because I don't know them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want that for my labor. And so I was like, well, now I need to deliver where I work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking through the practices and I was like, oh, I don't want a guy I work with to see my vagina, frankly, unless like it's life or death. So what practices are all female? There weren't many choices. And I go, what practice is going to have a female physician who, if I'm about to, I see the light and I'm about to die, she will do everything in her power and knows what to do to save my life and to save my baby. That's this doctor.
Because she's also lived it.
Yeah. And she's not gonna care about people's feelings.
Nope.
And she's gonna run over people if she has to save a life.
Yeah.
So that's why I picked her. But we're in this meeting and I kind of started yelling at her. I started crying. I was like, you have got to give me more time. And she's like, I've already called labor and delivery. I've scheduled your induction for Monday night. I go, what the hell? That crap doesn't work. I'm not coming in the night before. I know this from my last experience. I do not sleep at the hospital because I hear the call bell going off. I literally, when I was postpartum with my daughter, heard like 3 call bells go off at the same time in my hallway, and it woke me up out of sleep. And I thought I had to get up and go take care of that call bell. I said, I don't sleep at the hospital. I'm willing to do whatever. Just don't bring me in the night before. She goes, I'm not budging on this, Sacha. Every indication points, this is what I need to do. I go, but this is just crap. I'll go fast as soon as you break my water and start Pitocin. I went so fast with Bianca. I delivered in like 5 hours, from 3 to done in less than 5 hours, which is unheard of in a first-time mom. I go, I'm good. No, Sacha, you're going to be 41 weeks. Tuesday morning, I want you delivered. She's just like, this is how it's going to be. Deal with it. I will see you at 4:00 on Monday at the hospital. And I said, well, then I won't be there because that's Bianca's dance class. I will be there after her dance class. I promise you. I will be at the hospital checking in by 5:15. So I will see you on labor and delivery after your dinner. Because, I know her schedule, right? She's got to pick her boys up from school, take them home to the nanny, get them settled, get them fed, and then she would come to the hospital. I said, so why don't we just agree to disagree that, okay, fine. If I have to come in Monday night, we're going to compromise. I'm coming in Monday night and I will be there at this time and you will leave me a prescription for 10 of Ambien, not 5, 10, because that's what worked for me on night shift so that I can sleep through the night. And I agree to be monitored all night if that's what's required. And in the morning, as long as the fetal heart rate looks good, then I ask for 2 hours off the monitor so that I can go shower and go for a walk. And I mean, I live in the neighborhood. Like you can see my house from the hospital. But I was like, I would like to go for a walk that morning before you tether me to my room for the rest of the day. She's just like, oh, Sasha, okay, fine, that's fine. You can have breakfast, you can take a shower, go for a walk. I'll make you my last stop on Tuesday morning and rounds. Thank you. Well, I show up and I was like, I want a saline lock, which is just like the IV with the string in it. So that way they have IV access if they need it. I was like, let's ward off all the evil spirits. I really wanted this natural. Oh, and by the way, I saw her like Thursday. It was Labor Day weekend. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Every day I saw my acupuncturist trying to go into labor, did all his tips and tricks because he had gotten a lot of patients in this other practice into spontaneous labor. It's like, Master Lee, you got to make it happen. And then I also saw, I have the hypnotherapist that trains the midwife friend that teaches hypnobirthing. I also saw her for hypnotherapy during the pregnancy because of my anxiety. And I really, really wanted to try for natural because in my mind, it was, how do I coach a woman through natural childbirth if I can't even do it myself to walk their path and know what they feel, right? Because my words are kind of empty in my mind. And so I saw her like 2 or 3 times that last week. And I think I called her crying. I remember leaving the doctor's office. For some reason, I wanted to go near water and went for a long, long walk. It was like as far as my cell phone signal would take me in case I went into labor, crying, screaming at the universe, why I can't go into labor. Like, I just want this. Like, why can't you give me this? Like, why? And then I called the hypnotherapist in tears and I was like, oh, and she's like, come to my house now, And so went to her and she did like a 3-hour session with me, visualizing a positive birthing experience, trying to get my anger, anxiety, and all of it out and just bring positive energy into me. And then my doula friend and I were at each other's hip that whole weekend. I mean, I was doing everything to go into labor, spicy food. Oh my God, don't ever recommend. So one of the midwives was like, you need to take 2 tablespoons of almond butter mixed with castor oil and chase it with mimosa. Because the castor oil is kind of like an enema, right? Like back in the day, women would get enemas in labor. And so I was like, I'm this desperate. I hate almond butter. I'm literally drinking melted plastic. I don't mind the mimosa. That's pretty helpful. It helps you relax. But I was just like, even that didn't work. And I find after like a day and a half of it, I was like, I'm done. I finished the bottle of castor oil and nothing is happening. I'm over this. And I'm going up, like calling my friends on the unit. Who's on for the midwife practice this weekend? How busy are you? Oh, it's dead. And it's so-and-so. Awesome. I'm going to call them. And I would call their phone number like, hey, it's Sasha. Can I come up? Will you strip my membranes? Constantly asking, doing everything. I even went, I think at one point, the nurse who mentored me was on like Sunday and it was dead. And I was like, can I just come hang out at the nurse's station with you? Mind you, like I don't work there anymore. And I was like, can I just come hang out on labor and delivery? Maybe being around all of the oxytocin on the floor will get me into labor. Who knows? Still nothing. So finally, Monday lunch rolls around and I'm like, it's not going to happen. I have to surrender at this point, and it's just going to be what it is. And if I don't surrender now and start really thinking positively, then again, it's either going to be a quick birth or I'm going to be the train wreck, and I don't want to be the train wreck. So I have lunch with my doula friend and then, get my daughter, take her. She shows up with her little like ballet slippers on and her ballet outfit to the unit, and I get everything set up. She comes in and she's like, I want to use Cervidil, which is like a medicated tampon string. And I was like, that doesn't work for anybody, but fine, whatever. Just make sure I have 10 of Ambien, all right? And then, who's on call for anesthesia tonight? So the way our hospital works is there's 2 practices that have someone in-house 24/7. One is a private practice and one is the like local city public health department practice, just because the volume of their patients they have to stay in-house. It's the only way it makes sense. And so the private OBs, like if they go home, she lives 10 minutes away. I've been to her house for a pool party. Like she doesn't live far, but she doesn't need to be there. There's certain protocol where if, just for Cervidil, she wouldn't have to stay in the hospital. And so I was like, oh, who's on call for the clinic? And she tells me it's one of the men. And I was like, God. And I had told her this. I go, if it's one of the guy clinic docs, I don't want them backing you up. Unless I'm about to die or my baby's about to die, I don't want them in my room. I feel completely uncomfortable having a male colleague in the room. And all of the midwives were women. I said, are you okay that if I spontaneously need to deliver or something, is it okay that the midwife comes instead of the male physician? And she's like, well, I'll have to ask them when I'm there. I was like, okay. I really don't want him in my room. And everybody knew this. Like I checked in, told my mini day shift nurse that I had for like 2 hours, and then someone else at night. Like I don't want them in here unless I'm about to die. And so she came in, she gave me my Cervidil, everything's ready. And I have dinner with my family in the room. And then I send my husband and daughter home. Was like, there's no point in you staying here. And my husband's paranoid because 2 months earlier, my friend calls me at 3 a.m, Sacha, I think I need a ride to the hospital because her husband was gone that weekend. And I was like, okay, I'll come get you. Well, her husband missed the delivery. Like she almost delivered in my car. And so my husband for 2 months has been like, I better not miss my kid's delivery. I better be there when the baby's born. And I'm like, oh my God, seriously, go home. Go home with Bianca, go to bed. I'll see you in the morning. Nothing is going to happen tonight. This crap never works. Just go get a good night's sleep. And, here, we'll write your cell phone number down on the whiteboard. So if anything happens, nurses know, look on the whiteboard, call the person on the whiteboard. And I was like, and I'll call my friend Dawn. She's going to be my doula. So if I need her, I'm going to call Dawn first, and then Dawn can call you to come in. And we had always planned on my daughter being there, which I think people were kind of freaked out. She was only 3.5, but this baby was every much her baby. And she was at every single visit. She heard stories of me helping women in labor. And to me, it was like, I really want a natural childbirth, but also my daughter's old enough to remember this. And I want her to experience it because so many of my patients don't know anything about labor, or they only hear the horror stories. Like people don't talk about the good things. Everybody talks about the negative. And I said, I want to imprint on her the beauty and the simplicity and just Mother Nature at her best in the birth of a baby, because that's what I love. And I was like, if I can do this natural even more to empower her that natural childbirth is not anything to be afraid of. Because, well, my best friend, I was like, hey, were you planning on getting an epidural? And she's like, yeah. And I go, wrap your head around it. You are not getting an epidural. You're not going to have time. And just the shock and fear and anxiety for her that I can't do this naturally. And so I wanted to show my daughter that it can be done. And if you're struggling or things happen, there's a backup plan. There is an epidural if you need it. So I wanted her in the room. So eventually at some point I woke up and I was like not able to sleep through the contractions, right? So I was high as a kite with Ambien, highly recommend it if you don't have issues with it. I was high as high could be and literally would wake up, moan through a contraction, and then pass out. Wake up, moan through a contraction, pass out. And my friends had brought in like the giant exercise ball or birthing ball to the room. So I managed as long as I could by myself, because I was like, this is probably all this false labor early nonsense, PMSy, because it wasn't really regular. I was like, I'll just manage by myself. Like I know how night shift is. Don't come in here unless you have to. Okay. And I left the baby monitor on, the sound on for the fetal heart rate monitor, because I was like, I'm fine 24/7 monitoring. And it was great because his heartbeat was so consistent that it ended up almost being like its own sound machine, right? Dun, 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 dun. And so that kind of helped me with rhythm and everything. I put in my ear pods and listened to my hypnobirthing CDs, because at that point I had listened to them every night to fall asleep. I was asleep in like 5 minutes. So I was just wake up, moan for a minute, and go back to sleep. And then eventually I was having a harder time getting through them. So then I called my friend, hey, Dawn, I think I'm ready for you to come in, but not Eduardo yet. I don't think we're there yet. And then she came in, and at some point, I think she called him and was like, you may want to head in. And I think he came in like a bat out of hell, worried. And she was like, no, I gave you plenty of time to like wake up the preschooler, she came in her pajamas and everything. And thankfully that night, it was, I guess, a slow night on the unit. So, Don's working me through the contractions and helping manage Bianca. My husband is asleep on the couch like any other good husband. He's like, oh, your girlfriends are here to take care of you. And I guess at some point, I got to one point where kneeling was the only thing that was comfortable. So I lowered the foot of the bed and there's like a little divot in the mattress. And so I piled the pillows where your butt usually would be. And I just laid there with my head on the pillows, kneeling. And then I would kind of like lean back and squat into it when I had a contraction. At some point, I guess from stories I heard afterwards, my doula friend and then I guess the scrub tech, so the person who helps the doctors for C-sections, were taking turns rubbing my back. And it's like whatever they were doing, they had like a rhythm, I remember, to like over your sacrum. They had this rhythm kind of over the sacrum, top of my hips that they were doing. And I was able to kind of moan and groan through that. And that rhythm with their warm hands was what felt really good to me. And they were getting a lot more powerful. I was starting to finally feel some pressure. So I asked my friend, I said, can you have him come check me? Oh, yay, you're 4 centimeters. Awesome. Water is still intact, thank God. 4 centimeters. And I'm like, okay, like we're getting there. I have progress. So keep going, keep going. And then they're feeling more pressure, more intense. The same person checks me because, everybody's a little different. Yeah, not really much change. And I'm like, so now my head I was like, it's been a while. So now I'm going, oh my God, I'm stuck at 4 centimeters. But no way, it's like 4 a.m. There's no way in hell I'm going to wake the anesthesiologist up to put it in my epidural because I don't know them. They came on new while I was gone or something. And another one of my favorite anesthesiologists is on deck for day shift. So I was like, I got to get through to the morning. I got to get through to day shift, right? And I've kept moving and grooving, keeping that pelvis dynamic, trying to get that corkscrew out of the bottle. And, all my midwife friends, I'm hearing them coaching their other natural patients and what they were doing. So I was like internally coaching myself, but again, still able to totally melt and relax in between contractions, which that's all ambient. It was great. Can't recommend it highly enough. And I finally was just like, you know what? In my head, all of a sudden, one of my favorite midwives popped in and was like, a full bladder can hold the baby back and not let the baby drop down. So I was like, I got to empty my bladder. And so I go sit on the toilet, and that was the most uncomfortable position I have ever been in my entire life. It's like, again, if you've been constipated and you have like a 20-pound poop sitting there, and just imagine what that would feel like while you're sitting on a toilet and then you feel this big surge to push down on it. And so I'm in there, and my daughter, like, Mommy, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm worried about you, because she had been holding my barf bag for me and holding the fan and putting a wet towel. So she was kind of doulaing me too, right? And helping me. And Mommy, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Blueberry was the nickname we gave baby. And so Blueberry it hurts, but I'm okay. This is normal. And so then in my head, my maternal instincts kicked in and was like, I have to make this a positive memory for her, not a worrisome memory for her. And so I was like, how about we have a contest? I mean, it's like 5 a.m. The place is dead, right? And I'm in room 9, which is like the last room before you go to the OR. There's the pre and post surgical area across the way from me. So like I knew no one was in my wing of the unit. And I was like, let's have a contest to see who can moan the loudest next time Mommy has a contraction. Okay, that sounds great. And so my friend who's a doula filmed me sitting on the toilet, and then my daughter standing in front of me, like brushing my hair and stuff in between. And then I start my low moan. So then she starts, and then there's this competition where we're just trying to like, who can moan the loudest? And if you want audio from that, my friend filmed some audio.
Wait, go back in there. Mommy's going to have another one. She needs you to help yell. Why, Mommy? Why? Because it helps Mommy focus. It helps me do the deep noises. Wait. Remember we said the deep noises, the poo-poo noises, not the high screams? You got to help me make the poo-poo noises, okay? Ready?
And so then after that, I was like, okay, well, let's, help mommy walk back to the bed. And I think at that point I came in and there were a lot more activity happening, right? Because that moaning, I guess I was doing was that deeper, more guttural transition type moan that happened. Once I come in and someone's setting up the table for delivery, someone's turning on the warmer. I remember that much, but it was like the precipitous delivery. We call it stop and drop. They show up, they have a baby. That was my friend. But it was like that flurry of commotion and dance that everybody does on labor and delivery. And so I get back in bed and I was like, oh my God, the pressure. They checked me again. I was 9 centimeters. And I was like, oh yes, finally. Okay, I emptied my bladder. Let's do this. And I remember one of my students I mentored who was getting her master's degree, her research paper was on protecting the maternal perineum or bottom so that you don't tear. And that's like one of my biggest fears, right? And I remember her and like sharing the information that she found in her research about different positions for pushing, et cetera. And I was just like, kneeling and like squatting down was the only thing that was comfortable for me. And none of this like sideline nonsense. And there was no way, pardon my French, but no way in hell I was getting on my back to push out this baby because it was just too uncomfortable. And so I remember the midwife came in and I remember my friend screaming at my husband, like, wake up if you want to see your baby being born, because I hear him snoring like on the other side of the room on the couch. And so I remember her yelling at him and Bianca going like, Daddy, Blueberry's coming, And so then just all the chaos, everybody poops in labor. My daughter remembers it. My husband's like, kept trying to turn the fan to help with the smell. And I'm like, I'm dying. It's so hot in here. I'm like stark naked except for fetal monitors on my belly. I'm like, it is so hot. Like, you don't get the fan. Deal with it. The fan is for me. And so Bianca's holding the fan in the barf bag and, everybody's waving me down. And I remember the midwife putting like the sterile gauze things on like your bottom to try to help with the pressure and not let you tear. And I was like, get that sandpaper off my butt. That hurts so bad. Don't touch me there. And it happened all so fast. He was out so fast. When they come out fast and they have like the little popped vessels in their head and everything, like that's how fast he came out. I wish I would have controlled myself better. So I did tear quite significantly. I think I tore more than she told me I did. That repair does not feel good on your bottom when they're putting the anesthesia in. But then I remember my OB walking in. I think the head is out, right? And she walks in, it's like, what the F is going on in here? And I was like, get the baby out. So she was so upset that I'm like in hands and knees. She's a traditional on your back with your legs in the air. And the midwife's there and like, why isn't Dr. So-and-so in here? And of course, in true annoying fashion, it was a change of shift delivery. He was born at like 6:45 a.m. So everybody and their mother is in there with me, changing shift because I had planned it again. My mentor switched days with her friends so that she could be there to manage my induction on Tuesday and everything. Well, she comes in, baby's already out, right? I was like, sorry. It was a flurry of craziness. My daughter was like, Blueberry is a boy? Because we said she gets to tell everybody what Blueberry is. And so she was completely devastated. She loves him now, though. They're like 2 peas in a pod. Did skin to skin. And then pediatrician comes down to do rounds because they're already there to do the other rounds and just the chaos of change of shift. And then I got the shakes, which I thought was so interesting. So I didn't have it with my daughter. I don't think I've ever seen a vaginal delivery patient get the shakes. And I mean, it's like full body shaking. And I've only ever seen it with my patients who come out of the OR and they've said it's from some of the medicines and stuff where like the only way to stop the shaking is to like physically hold you down and then the muscles kind of stop spasming. But I was like shaking all over the bed and there's pictures of me that look like I'm a hypothermic patient. I mean, there's warm blankets from the OR all over me. Only my face is out, baby's underneath all of this, trying to breastfeed and everything. And I was just like, wow, like, why am I shaking so bad? I was like, I didn't have a C-section. What the hell? And I think it was just, it has to be like the surge of hormones and just all of the energy after a big, natural childbirth like that and just how fast I went. It's, this like mini sprint, right? Like a Olympic marathon sprint that I did. And then I remember my friend took me upstairs, got me checked in, and then she's like, thank God you delivered when you did. And I was like, why? She said, because the first C-section of the day came in all cranky because she had to get up and be at the hospital by 5:30 and this, that, and the other, and was just being a total prima donna. and she was parked in the room across from you, and you just kept getting louder and louder. And at some point she like had the fear of God in her eyes when I walked in to check on her. They're like, oh, that's just one of our nurses having a baby, like just nonchalant. And they go, she finally just stopped being a prima donna and was just like, oh, thank God I'm not going through that, you know? And I kind of was just like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, I guess I kind of helped you guys with my carrying on nonsense because I'm not a quiet person. So I must have been very loud.
Perspective is very important.
Yeah. So, and to this day, like daughter, she's 11. She still remembers it, not in fear and anxiety or anything. Just like, wow, that was a really intense experience. And with him prepping for his delivery, like I knew the whole postpartum depression thing, I set my expectations a lot lower. So I actually set up my own meal train and sent it to people. When people are like, how can I help? I go sign up for the meal train, like bring food to my family. I dove a lot deeper into a lot of the Eastern medicine postpartum care because my husband's Korean. So Korean tradition is nothing cold. So like your body has to maintain a certain temperature, like no ice water. It's only lukewarm water or hot tea or hot beverages, soups or hot meals, no ice cream, keeping the house at a certain temperature, all of that. And it was a perfect time of year. Like it was very easy to stay consistently 74. And I lamented that before I had him, but afterwards it was completely comfortable. I got used to it actually. It was pretty interesting. But also just setting the bar a lot lower. Like I'm not going to be doing laundry. I'm not going to be doing chores. My job is to shower every day and eat good food for myself and my baby and breastfeed my baby. So anything else that happens, other people need to figure out how to do that. And so like my girlfriend came and took Bianca for the day and brought a bag of groceries for us and like a lot of snack type stuff for me. I had my team in place, like my husband, my doula friend, my midwife friend had moved out of the area at that time, but maybe like 2 other people that I would naturally talk to on a regular basis. We have an action team set up that if Sacha starts saying these different words or talking about her feelings in this way, then we need to remind her that she needs to go see her therapist. And I had printed out sheets of like warning signs of postpartum depression and stuff and put it on the wall in front of the changing table. So every time I changed him, I would see that. And it was my own mental checklist. Like, am I feeling this? Am I not feeling this? And I knew if I'm feeling this, I need to speak up and say I need help. And everybody knew they would have to just drop everything and help me. So I think that actually, I don't think I experienced postpartum depression with him. It was actually the best postpartum experience ever. I had a really good time. And I literally just breastfed him all day. Again, because of the surgery, I can't just like feed a kid in 15 minutes. It's a hour-long process. That took up most of my time. But I just focused on him and feeding him. And as far as I know, for now, that was my last breastfeeding journey. And I'm glad it went the way it did and it ended with him deciding he's done. And it was like for 15 months, whereas my daughter, I had to struggle to get to 9 months. And then I pumped for like 4 more months after that. You know, we get discharged 24 hours after delivery because, you know, you're an experienced mom and you're fine mom and baby's looking okay, just a little jaundice because, well, you know, I'm breastfeeding him, but it takes a while for my supply to come in and you're supposed to have colostrum anyway at that point. And then he's part Asian, which is a risk factor for jaundice. And they said, you need to see the pediatrician tomorrow to just get his jaundice checked out. And I was like, well, I mean, if you think I should stay 1 more day to monitor him more closely, I'm fine with it. You don't need to discharge me. And the nurse is like, well, I agree with you. I'd rather keep you, but the pediatrician has already discharged your son. And I was like, okay, then I guess we're getting discharged, which to this day irritates me. So we get discharged. We go back the next day. He already looks like my 3-year-old took a yellow highlighter to him. And they're like, oh, you have to get to Children's Hospital now. Like, I'm like, can I go home? No. Like, you need to go straight there. I got there and it was like they were ready for me. And I was, what the hell is going on? And he was on like every possible Billy light you could imagine. Top, sides, under, blanket, you name it, he had it. And they were drawing his blood on an hourly basis because it just kept skyrocketing. And I had been diagnosed and been watched for hypothyroid. And they said it could be that. I'm like, but it was managed throughout the pregnancy. So I don't know. And they're like, well, you know, his levels just keep going high. So of course I go to Dr. Google because I don't remember any of that from nursing school and reading all these horror stories. And I was just like, okay, I really wanted to do exclusive breast milk, but at this point, that's not an option. Bring me formula. I'm force feeding him every hour, putting him to breast when I can. And I was having issues like scabs on my nipples. He would latch and it felt like someone was hitting me with a hot poker. Horrible. And I was like, he has a tongue tie, just like his sister, and a lip tie. And I looked at him like I had spent 3 years educating myself on tongue ties because it can be genetic and it can run in families. And I was like, I'm going to be prepared for this. And I was like, he totally has it. And so he gets admitted before dinner. So I'm like, oh, I'm not going to torture anybody right now. Like, let's just get his Billy levels to come down. That's the priority. So in the middle of the night, they finally start to come down. Morning shift comes around. It's a teaching hospital. So I've got med student 1, 2, 3, and 4, first year resident, second year resident, third year resident, the day shift nurse, the night shift nurse, and the doctor, all these people rounding on me. I'm like, this is a little too much for me right now, but okay. And then one of the residents was really sweet. And I was asking the nurse, how do I go about getting an ENT in here to assess him for his tongue ties? And the resident speaks up. He goes, oh, I just finished my ENT rotation. They do that. You just have to have the lactation consultant put in an order to have the ENT. And I was like, can you guys make that happen, please? And the nurse is like, sure, yeah. So she puts in the lactation consultant. And I usually don't correct people in their clinical assessment, like let's say in front of the patient. So she comes in like, why am I being dragged to the other side of the hospital for this lactation consult? And I usually don't tell people that I'm a labor and delivery nurse, that my hobby is breastfeeding and natural delivery, but I just enjoy soaking up information about that. She walks in and doesn't even put her fingers in his mouth to assess him, barely assesses his latch, and tries to hand me a nipple shield. And I looked at her and I go, get that crap out of my face. Well, no, I go, let's put this straight. I've been a labor and delivery nurse for 10 years. I've been on the path to trying to become a lactation consultant. My husband has a tongue tie. My daughter had a tongue tie. Tongue ties run in family. Next time, do your damn research if you don't know before coming into my room. You were a formality. Get out of my room and put the order in for the ENT. You obviously do not know what you're talking about, and I suggest you go learn about tongue ties if you're going to call yourself a board-certified lactation consultant. And she just looked at me. I go, I expect an order for the ENT. Well, either she never put it in or he wasn't going to be able to round until the next day and we were getting discharged. So I was like, whatever. So then I went to the ENT that I had scheduled already the following week. She spent like an hour trying to convince me that he should get his tie released. And I go, oh, I'm not doubting this at all. I'm here for you to confirm my assessment that my son has a tongue tie and for you to do what you need to do to fix it. I knew he had it, but I wanted an expert's opinion. You just gave me that he needs it. You don't need any convincing. Where's the consent form? I will sign it. Let's get this over with. And oh my God, night and day, the latch and everything else was so much better.
Did your daughter get a tongue tie release?
Well, so this is a sad thing. So none of the lactation consultants identified it. I went to a pediatric practice where they had nurse practitioners who were also board certified lactation consultants. I saw them. I saw the other lactation. No one identified anything. They were like, no. But she has a posterior tongue tie, which are usually the hardest to diagnose. And finally, we were in Nevada when she was 6 months old visiting my sister-in-law. And I was sharing this with her and she's like, oh, you have to see my lactation consultant here. They are amazing. And I knew they were amazing because I had been her postpartum doula when she had her first and I had taken her to all her lactation appointments. So I was like, oh yeah, I love them. So we made an appointment and within seconds, she was finally assessed. People hadn't put their fingers in her mouth or done any tongue movement assessment. And she's like, yeah, she has a posterior tie. And then I think part of the postpartum depression is like, I didn't want to deal with it or I felt overwhelmed by it because I was back to work and it just was too much. And my husband kept harassing me. Like, you need to take care of it. You need to take care of it because it'll affect her speech or whatever later in life. And so finally I went to someone everybody recommended. I was like, can you fix it? And he's like, oh, she's too big. I can't fix it unless I put her under. And I was like, what? He goes, I have to put her under general anesthesia. I was like, you can't give her light anesthesia here. And he's like, no, it's got to be at the hospital. And so at 9 months old, she had surgery, went under general anesthesia and had the tie released. Worst moment of my life as a mother. My husband is hands off, if you haven't noticed, with medical stuff, because that's me. I'm the labor and delivery nurse. I should know everything. And they let one parent walk back to the OR with the young child. And so he's like, well, that's what you, right? I'm like, yeah, sure. So in my head, in my body, I've taken off mom hat and I now have Sacha nurse hat on, right? And I kind of knew my way around a little bit because that's where I did my training for nursing school. So I knew the hospital some and had been in the OR some. So we go in, I'm like, oh, it's an OR. Like, it's just like our OR. And I'm in prep surgery mode. But then I have to hold my 9-month-old daughter down while they induce her. Like, they weren't fully intubating her, but they were putting the mask on her face. And to have this vigorous, very strong 9-month-old go as limp as a wet noodle scared the bejesus out of me, even though I had put patients to sleep. I had seen babies born under general anesthesia, wet like lymph noodles. Like I had to walk around the whole campus for like half an hour crying before I could see my husband, because I knew if I saw him, he would have lost his marbles.
Yeah.
But she recovered from it, but it was a lot harder recovery for her than my son. It was really interesting. So his was repaired at a week old. He's 8, almost 8 now. No mention of sensitivity, no issue brushing teeth, none of that. Whereas my daughter at 9 months old, I mean, for years, like just brushing her top, upper, front teeth where like the lip tie release was done was hard, because she just was like, it hurts, it hurts. I couldn't really do the exercises you're supposed to do. So I don't know if it healed properly as well as like my son's, because I just couldn't hold down this aggressive 9-month-old. So I've always told patients, if you're thinking about it, get it done while they're really, really young. It's just easier for everybody, because it was in the office. I mean, no anesthesia, which maybe is a little evil, but they just got some really sharp scissors, went in there, snip, snip under the tongue, and then put him right on the boob. And he was as happy as could be. So I always start back in early, and I still talk to all the lactation girls at my hospital on the postpartum unit that had worked with me before and knew Sasha's coming in. These are the issues. And they all, like, none of them caught it. And he was like obviously having issues, which just frustrates me. It's one of these things, maybe when I retire, I will become a postpartum lactation consultant and just show all of them up and actually give moms the care that they should be getting.
I think it's hard too in the hospital though, because you have such limited time and you got all the people to see. And I think it's more like, unfortunately, the ones that are there after you go home are the ones that are more specialized in that, because it can take more time, but not everybody has access to that.
No. Well,
I sure didn't. The second time I was texting my colleagues.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so you bring up the access issue, which is, I love our breastfeeding center here. I can't speak high. I mean, I haven't seen them in 8 years, but the Greater Washington Breastfeeding Center downtown near GW and Foggy Bottom, I highly recommend them because they are all about accessibility. So at the time, because I was not working, my husband was self-employed, like we didn't have a lot of money. And so that's the other issue, is that I was discharged. And so then I had to pay another hospital copay for the readmission of my son, versus the pediatrician listening to us and the hospital saying, we can discharge mom, but we can keep the baby here another 24 hours. Like, I wish they had done that, because that would have saved me like $6,000.
Wow.
So rushing me out of the hospital was no bueno. But the lactation place was great. And I always encourage moms I've talked to, always ask. So this group of lactation consultants, they had a deal where if you couldn't afford a consult, they would do in-kind time. And so for a 30-minute consult, you would have to volunteer like 4 hours. And you could bring your baby with you, first of all, or you could have someone volunteer on your behalf. So like my husband could go, my best friend could go, just that's how they kept their costs down, right? Instead of hiring people to do this. But you will go and like you'd be in charge of, restocking the bras, or like after someone tried them all on, like putting them back, or, stocking the shelf, or they have goodie bags for their clients and for their classes that they teach. So making the goodie bags, just really low, easy stuff to do for 4 hours. And so that was amazing, because I got a ton of lactation support and I didn't have to do anything but volunteer. I was like, okay, yes, sign me up. So I always tell patients, always ask if there's a place that really values taking care of women. I'm sure they'll work something out with you, or sliding scale for cash paid and stuff like that. Like, always ask. But even when I would float to and rotate into postpartum because they had too many patients and labor and delivery didn't, you can make time for it. Like, I get you're busy. I get you have a lot of patients, but something I learned early in nursing school, just 5 minutes sitting down with someone and giving them your undivided attention saves you 4 hours throughout your shift, right?
Yeah.
And paying attention to the moms, or at least pointing them in the right direction. So spending the 5 minutes to listen to their challenge, and then being honest with them. Hey, I've got 5 other moms, 6 other babies I got to deal with, and they all have the same needs. So let me send you to this blog, these YouTube videos, why don't you look at that when I'm not here, and then I'll circle up with you when I round on you next. Now, I didn't hang out at the nurse's station. I didn't take all of my breaks because I was constantly in my patients' rooms checking on them. So that comes into like that art of nursing and clinical practice and how you work, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting. I still remember like the that second delivery, the doctor yelling at everybody, me kicking the lactation consultant out of the room. And the recovery was a bit rough. I think what was probably a 3rd degree. When I went back 6 weeks postpartum is usually, may have changed since then, your first checkup with your OB after you deliver. And she had to put some extra stuff on it to get it to heal. Like it still hadn't healed by then. So if I could go back and do it again, going from a upper 6 baby to a mid 8.5 pound baby was very different. And I probably should have gotten epidurals to make my recovery easier on the other end.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
So you pushed with an epidural and you pushed without an epidural.
Yeah.
It sounds like you didn't push for very long with either.
Right.
Was it kind of a fetal ejection reflex with both, or was it something where you had to kind of like really think and coordinate those muscles?
Maybe with my daughter, I had, with the epidural, had to think and coordinate a little bit. But for me, it was the pressure. I don't remember. I call it painful pressure, right?
Right.
I don't remember from Liam. And I think that's interesting. Like I remember more from my first delivery with the epidural than the second. I think it's just, nature's way to like help you forget so that you'll have more kids. Yeah. I don't remember, maybe a little bit the ring of fire and that burning as that head is emerging, but I just remember the pressure. Like that's what stuck with me. And I always felt pressure with both of them. With my son, I couldn't control it. Like my body just took over. Like it wasn't me thinking I need to push like I'm pooping. I just surrendered to what my body was naturally trying to do and just was like, get it out, like my body did its own thing and I just went with the flow.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think people need to hear the kind of moving into that pressure. I think it's hard sometimes to figure that out, but if you just go with it, like you said, it does help.
Well, and it's a great guide. I mean, for moms that get epidurals, I see no point at all. If baby is fine, mom is fine, everybody's happy as a clam, there is no point you start pushing as soon as they're 10 centimeters.
Correct.
Like that is just stupidity. Like it's asinine. I know you're excited to meet your baby who isn't, but why are you going to make yourself work hard?
Right.
That's just where you put more effort into laboring down. So helping
positioning.
Positioning your patient. And after having my daughter, when I went back to the unit, once someone was deemed complete, right, 10 centimeters with an epidural, but she's comfortable feeling some pressure, I would tell them, listen, if the pressure gets to be too much, push down on it, like try to push it away, try to push like you're having a bowel movement, but not too hard, just enough to take the edge off. And then I would set a timer on my phone, and every 15 minutes, I would go rotate her into a different position. So I was getting that corkscrew, helping her out, and not until that head really comes underneath the pubic bone in a meaningful, like really deeply engaged way, do you need to start pushing by that point?
And then get your team there and just have a baby.
Yeah.
It's exhausting for everyone. It's exhausting for the nurse, the husband, the patient. It's physically demanding. Well, for everybody, right? Obviously the mom.
Well, you're holding dead legs.
Yes, that. Yeah. I mean, I have shoulder injuries from that. And it's like, we can just let nature work and keep everybody safe and not have to make it a crazy experience.
Well, you've heard stories of women who are in a coma that give birth. I don't understand why we force women to push. I get like if the baby's in distress and we know we can get it done and get that vaginal delivery versus a C-section. If everything is okay and everything's just happening, make your life easy, man. As my current boss says, work smarter, not harder.
Right. Yeah.
Let's work smarter here. Let's move your body and just let your uterine muscle do the work. But I have had patients who have struggled with epidurals because maybe they've been heavy-handed epidurals where they're really just too strong. They've been hitting their butt and not telling me that they're bolusing themselves with more. And that's where I always find, maybe I was a bit pushy, but my moms, I would kind of always convince them, like, you need to let me bring the mirror here. No, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. You need to let me. No, I don't want to see it. Do you want to be here pushing all night and end up with a C-section because you can't figure out how to do it? No. Okay, then I'm going to ask you, we're going to compromise. I'm going to ask you to watch yourself push through a couple of contractions to see what you're doing and to make that mind-body connection. And if you still can't stand having the mirror there, I'll flip it around. You won't have to look at it. But you have to see, when I do this happens.
Yeah.
And that usually would get my moms to a point where they can put it together. And I tell everybody, the best epidural is one where you don't feel the pain of the contraction, like the muscle spasm in your abdomen. You don't feel the other pain, but that you have painful pressure. And no amount of drugs we give you are going to take that pressure away. So stop hitting your button. It is that baby's head coming into your pelvis and separating and pushing the bones apart a little bit, which it's supposed to do. That's normal Mother Nature, and that's okay. But it's that baby's head coming into the pelvis that's making you so uncomfortable because there's so much pressure. But you cannot get rid of that. There's nothing I can do for that other than push against it and make it go away by having a baby.
One of the other things is when I have them push it, it's more for their own entertainment.
Right?
Because it's like, if they're noticing too much that they're having the pressure with the contractions, but it's not constant pressure, I will say, push your button and then let me know when you have constant pressure. And so by then, usually it's time.
Right,
you know?
Exactly.
But sometimes I feel like medicine is the art of entertaining the patient while nature takes its course. So,
I love that. I love that.
I don't know who that quote is from, but it is like what I live by.
I love it.
It's, you push your button because that makes you think something's happening. It makes you think and I say it's not going to get rid of it. It's just going to take the edge off.
Yeah.
And then we will move through the rest. And I won't have you push your button after that, because then the taking the edge off is going to be pushing into that so that you can feel what's going on.
Yeah.
Because I think so much of that's why I love that you're talking about hypnobirthing, which I never experienced, but the things that I've heard about it, I kind of wish I'd done it, because it's a lot of having to remind yourself that this is natural and that you're not actually experiencing this pain because of something that is wrong. And so I think that flip in the switch and the mindset and understanding that what you're feeling is what you're supposed to be feeling, unless it's not. And then that's why we have interventions. Right. And it's not something that you should be feeling. It's not something that should be happening. We're going to move forward with an intervention. Yeah. And so I think that is a great way to emotionally prepare. And I think that when you tell them that they're pushing through that and that's a normal, then that really just changes everything.
Well, I'll say, like, pushing against that pressure was the best relief ever. You know, again, that car ride, you're constipated, you have this giant 20-pound poo, like, you're kind of like, oh, finally, like, it hurts, but it feels good.
So funny. Another thing I wanted to touch on that I really love that you did for your second pregnancy. I think a lot of people, so we have gone away from the village. Like, this is not how we raise children anymore. We have it in our heads that we're supposed to be independent, but our natural way to commune is to not be independent, right? So how does that balance work? We don't want to jump in and force ourselves on anybody. And so we also don't want to ask for help. So there has to be a way, you know? And I think that the fact that you were able to share with your community what you needed was probably helpful for them and for you. Right. And I would love to encourage more moms to do that. And so if we could bridge that and help women, because that's one of the biggest challenges that I had. I did have, when I had my daughter, I had friends that had just had babies, and they insisted on coming over and they insisted on talking me through some things that I didn't even know were a problem. I just kind of felt overwhelmed. And so I loved that. And they brought me food, but I didn't know what to ask for with the first. And with the second, I felt like I had to know it all, you know? Right. I did lean on my friends that were lactation consultants, but it's hard to ask for what you need. And I think if you had that tool, it would be helpful.
Well, and a first-time mom isn't going to know what she needs, right?
Right.
And the other thing is, like, please stop with the 5 million lasagnas. Like, good God. So, OMG. And I've made it my own personal mission. Anybody I know, like, when they have a baby, I'll make like beef soup, like a traditional Korean beef soup. And then when I deliver the meal, it always comes with like grab and go snacks that are, especially the mom's breastfeeding, grab and go snacks that various people told me they've enjoyed. Like, my one friend had a jar of nuts always next to her chair, and she would snack on nuts. Another person was like, I loved those like snack cheese cracker things. So I always deliver like nibbly middle of the night type things for the mom to help her through. And sometimes I think the onus is on us experienced moms to go into the first time mom and to offer what we are comfortable doing for them. Right. So I would come and say, I'm going to the grocery store. What do you need? Not, can I get it for you? No, what do you need? I will get it for you. And kind of be a little bit pushy in a good way. And our job as a support community is to not go snuggle the baby, is not to go do the things a new mom should be doing. Other than, I remember one of our colleagues, her husband was deployed. So she was by herself, and her baby had horrible acid reflux and had to be held all the time. So then we all took shifts to go to her house. The night shift girls took the night shift because they're used to being up all night. And we would all go take shifts so that she could sleep for a couple hours. So like in that instance, yes, it's okay. Your job is to come hold the baby. But if not, that baby belongs next to that mom. It's good for the baby. It's good for the mom. Your job is to come take care of the other kids, pick up her house for her, do a little laundry for her, or if she wants to wash it, you fold it or take it to a fold and go and pay for it for her.
Yes.
We've got to think outside the box. And I know our church actually just started a new 40 days for new moms. So they have a new volunteer group. Anybody can participate, where any new mom at the church just lets us know when she's had the baby, and then people will just come check in on her for the first 40 days.
That's
just
amazing.
Like, we need to get back to this. Like, if you look at all of the other cultures and communities of the world, American mothers are just basically abandoned.
Yeah.
It's like our job, we're the vessel to provide the child, and no one cares about us.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about our challenges and experiences with each other, and those of us that have had challenges, I think we are more inclined, and that are open with it, are more inclined to help other new moms. Or go like, it looks like you're having a rough time. Do you just need to cry and have someone hold you? I will do that for you. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to not know what you're doing. And that's why we're here for you. And we've gotten away from that. And I think, as you said, like, we really need to get people in on that.
Yeah. Recreate the village.
Yeah.
Step by step, and have a guide on how to do it.
Right. Well, and share those stories, right? Share, not all of us are gazillionaires like Hollywood starlets that can have a staff to do everything for us and have our perfect postpartum body 3 weeks later and all that stupidity. Real women have real challenges. Yeah. Well, and I think about our healthcare. Like, I had patients who were like, wait, I can't go back to work for 4 weeks. I go, no, you just had this major abdominal surgery, but I only get 2 weeks off. I'm sorry, what?
Gosh.
And I mean,
That's
these are women
insane.
that can't afford any help,
Right.
and they're going through all of this. So there's a lot that needs to change, but I guess start with me, right?
Right.
And help the moms that I know.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Sacha, is there anything else that you wanted? I'm going to have you back on, because
anytime.
I'm sure there's so many things that we just see eye to eye on. And I think, like, if we just put our brains together, we could fix a lot of problems.
We could solve the world's problems.
Right. Let's do it.
We should run for office, right? You and me.
No, I don't want to. I'll help you. I'll be in the background. I get in trouble. I say things that...
Girl, if people heard what really went on in my mind, I would have...
Oh my gosh. Same. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited for this episode to air.
Let's face it, moms are busy. We're so busy taking care of others that we rarely have time to take care of ourselves. I'd love to simplify that for you. I'm offering a free 15-minute hair care or skincare consult to help you find an uncomplicated routine using clean, vegan, anti-aging hair care and skincare products that follow the strict EU standards for safety. For your free consult, just send me an email at birthjourneysrn@gmail.com and we'll schedule a call. I'm excited to be a part of your self-care journey.
Thank you so much for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Don't forget to share the podcast with a friend who can benefit from the valuable insights that we share here. And if you could take a moment to leave a 5-star rating and review, it would mean the world to me. If you're ready to work one-on-one with me to embark on a transformational journey towards a confident and empowered hospital birth experience, go to kellyhoff.com/empowered and enroll in my Empowered Hospital Birth Coaching Program. Together, we'll create a roadmap to a birth experience that you'll cherish forever. That's KELLYHOF.com/empowered. Let's make your birth experience extraordinary.